First Budget Finance Growth Committee meeting of 2024. Rob, in the short term here, would you like to give the little speech for all of our folks in attendance who may want to provide their thoughts?
Good afternoon. If you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public, please click the hand icon now. You will have 10 minutes. We will ask you your name, association to the district, and your school that you're affiliated with. And then we will have you speak during the speaking of the public at the end of the session. Thank you.
So I think the first thing on the agenda for today is to appoint a committee chair. Would nominate myself for that. I don't know if we need a second in there. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say I'm grateful because I'm not particularly interested in being committee chair. That might just be an easy decision.
All right. Well, sounds like.
Do we need a vote on that? We do need a vote. Okay.
Okay. So all in favor of me being committee chair? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You guys have it. So that was an easy point. Get through that part of the agenda. All right. So the next part, it might be the more fun part of this thing here, is figuring out a meeting schedule. Historically, we had met on the third Friday, and I think Ms. Dave has shared a copy of the last year's schedule. Today clearly is not a Friday, nor is it the third Friday, nor could we have met on the third Friday because Mother Nature didn't want us to. But trying to figure out if there's a day that works for each of the board members here, day of the week that's better for others, as well from the folks, both Jen and the folks from the treasurer's office. What days work best for folks to meet?
Hey, Phyllis. I just was catching up on scheduling things. We don't have a recurring day for policy yet. Is that right? And so we're not going to meet Friday.
And so let me maybe first pose to our staff who are here and office here. Historically, we did it on Fridays. I know it's been the date the last 2 years that I've been on this committee, and I don't know if that's still a date that works better, or if it's better to work some other day of the week. I also know that our treasurer is virtual for at least a little longer here, so. But is there? I'm here.
So, Brandon, you were just asking, is there a day of the week that's better for people? I think I have a slight preference for Fridays, but I could really probably make just about anything work.
I don't have a preference. I do want us to kind of come with the cadence, at least for February. If we're waiting until policy makes a decision, I'm happy to adjust it after February, but I do need some planning, and I think probably the staff does as well, just to be respectful. So if we could just plan for February, and then by that time we'll have a date for policy. I think you all are on.
Oh, I think we can make policy work around us. Okay. I'm fine for us to, we've tried a couple times. It's hard. I get it. Yeah. It's hard for everybody.
I got you. Okay. Well, let's just say whatever it is fine. As long as I know ahead of time, I can make some plans. I just kind of need to know ahead of time, preferably either early first thing or later. Middle of the day is a little difficult. I'm going to bring a lunch. I encourage everybody else to as well. But if I know, I'm happy.
Absolutely. Does Fridays work for you all?
Any inertia. We're socialized to it at this point. For sure.
We had been doing the third Friday, and And I think that was again part because policy was on the third Friday as well. It was kind of an easy use of that day. Again, I don't have a particular preference to any particular Friday, but I would say that if we are doing the third Friday, does it work also for our schedule of when we need to have things come through the committee? Is the other question I would have, and maybe that's a Jen question, or
May I respond? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we picked the third Friday because it gives us time to close out the month and get the financial reports together. So my preference would be to stay on Fridays.
Correct.
How about third Friday?
Third Friday is good. I think
What time?
So again, in respect of request of Dr. Moffitt, with regards to kind of shooting for times, no policy has always typically gone earlier, and then we kind of followed it. I know that puts a little bit of a time frame because I know policy originally had moved their time frame back a half an hour, I believe it was. They were trying to shoot for us to admit we would move back. I kind of agree with Dr. Moffitt. I would prefer to either do earlier or do a little later, not necessarily like I don't say like 4 o'clock, but maybe a little later. But I want to see.
I think there would be no good answer to this. Like, I think I have a standing commitment that goes till 9 on Fridays, and so I could be somewhere as early as 9:30. And if we picked that policy could go a different Friday, we could do a 9:30 type thing, no problem. We also my daughter goes to Hyde Park, which gets out at 2, and so there will be some Fridays where I gotta be available to go pick her up.
I would say let's for now then shoot for does 10 o'clock work? Is that early? Let's for now shoot for 10 o'clock. I will have a discussion with Mike to reiterate that they don't have a regular scheduled time. And then if it needs to change, I think we can do that through communication.
Sure.
But
Texting. Oh, okay.
But I think 10 o'clock on Fridays. Jen, is that the third Friday at 10 o'clock? Is that?
Yes. Would that be a 2-hour block, or what? What are you thinking in terms of how the length of the meeting?
My hope is that we could get to an hour and a half block as a regular thing. I think, realistically, there are going to be some stuff that we're probably going to have some days where it'll be longer. I think that's one of those things that Jen, you and I, and can talk about as we put together the agendas. But I think as a standing block, maybe an hour and a half is a standing block. That's what I believe, had or hour 15 was the standing block last time, right?
I think it was 2. Oh, was it?
It was an hour and a half?
I had a 2-hour window on my calendar. I would much rather, this is just a Kareem preference, I would much rather block 2 hours and we don't take 2 hours, because I don't want to block an hour and a half and we're taking 2 and then I'm backed up on my other things. So I think it's better to err on the side of more time but not used, yes, then.
And I have no problem with that. I think, again, I think what we will hopefully see as we go through this year is that we're probably going to have, the goal will be to have more days where we can get as much information out in the most efficient way so that everybody can enjoy the rest of their day doing other wonderful work. But yes, it's still a good productive use of time to have the 2-hour block, at least for now. And then if anything changes or if we need to make any adjustments, we'll figure that out as we go along. So I think that would mean our next meeting, I should probably look at the calendar before I started that statement.
I was going to ask you, so what did we decide?
The third Friday, so February 16th at 10 in the noon. That work? February 16th, 10 to noon is the block of time. Yeah. And then again, we can follow up with policy committee to verify what their schedule is going to tend to be, and if we have
Here you go, Ms. Phillips. I'm sorry. I didn't
email
get
communication from either the staff or from myself. All right, so we're halfway through our agenda already. Let's go.
Woohoo!
Go.
Party! Give me some time back.
Homage to the past board chair, I think it'd be a good idea also to quickly go around for the millions of people watching on our online here to just introduce everybody. So we'll start on this side here with Kevin.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency.
Cody Hutchins, Contract Analyst.
Michael Guston, Assistant Treasurer.
Lauren Roberts, Chief Audit Executive.
Emma Mueller, Internal Audit Supervisor.
Lindy, board member.
Brandon Craig, board member.
Dr. Moffitt, board member.
Phyllis Davis, the board's administrative assistant.
And
Online.
online, we have. You can introduce yourself.
I was having trouble unmuting myself, sorry. Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
Alrighty. The third thing on our agenda today is the work plan for this year, and I think it's something we can kind of talk through. Everyone should have received, and I don't know if Lauren, if you all received the copy that we had there. There are a couple of but what everyone should have is a copy of the work plan from last year. I don't know that we've made substantial changes to the responsibilities and duties on there, although I want to get some of the opinion from the Treasurer's office. But we also need to make sure we are updating at least the when tasks need to be done, as well as the transaction schedule to reflect this year's schedule. Make sure we have it up to date. Treasurer Wagner, are there things on the work plan that you think are substance that we should be thinking about and paying attention to as far as changes that are needed?
It's been a while since I've read through the responsibilities, but the thing that just caught my eye was there's one about lobbying, and the lobbyists don't come to Finance Committee anymore. I think it's F, yeah. So it's something that if the committee has a desire to have them report on occasion, like whenever things come up, because I don't hear from them at all anymore. I think they deal with Dan and maybe the superintendent, but maybe helpful if they would ship over to us, bills that are financially related.
And I think that's a good point. I know we have not really, we've changed somewhat of how we handle the folks who are our lobbyists coming to the board, because they were also part of other committees as well that do reports that I don't think we always have information provided directly, and then part of either board business meeting or the committee of the whole, student achievements committee of the whole meeting. So it's certainly something for us to kind of think through as whether or not that's something we still want on the responsibilities. I do think it might be helpful, though, given that we are going to have some particular changes to how funding goes, and maybe some challenges that might be as a result of that. That it may be something to still keep on our responsibilities, and potentially have someone come and talk to us about that, because I know the formula itself is something that every couple of years we're going to have to revisit. Are there other thoughts?
I'll go after.
You go.
So it also semi-falls under O when I reviewed it briefly. I do think that having the lobbyists come and give us specific information is helpful to this particular committee. For example, I asked Mr. Kearney and some Donnie Isaacson about a bill that is being proposed by Representative Isaacson to pay students to attend school. It's for kindergarten, but it's very relevant to finance. And so there are very great, where there are good things that are going on, or there are things going on that we need to be aware of and be made aware of. So I think to have this on the work plan, and actually to get into a cadence of having them come and tell us what's coming down the pike that could potentially impact us financially, and that does stand a chance of actually passing. So I'm all for it, and it does fall under O as well. That's the other thing that I said. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Are we first names? Are we last names in committees? It's been a while since I'm down for first names if other people are,
names,
but if
it's
we
fine
need to
with
do first names. All right, Brandon, thank you. I was on finance committee 2 years ago, but it's been a minute. And I think from my perspective, I am all for scaling this way down. And just from my personal, from one board member's perspective, I'd love to make sure we do the things we're legally required to, whatever those are. I'd like to make sure that we're engaged around the budget and updates on that process, kind of vetting that before it comes to the full board. I think there's a helpful role for finance committee to play. I'm very interested in, and Kareem, I'm interested if you would want to pick up on some of this too, but a lot of the stuff from the Edunomics course around return on investment and equity analysis, I think is really interesting and could be healthy and helpful for us. That's it. I think my other my last category would be, are there ways we could be helpful for you all? And I think if that's true, I think we should do a lot of that. And then from the lobbyist perspective, I think we, just for my part, we had some back and forth on this over the last couple of years and I think got it to a good spot. I don't feel a need to have lobbyists come to the committee. I would prefer just to keep that the way we've had it set up most recently.
So I think one of the things we can do with this, and I want to still get any additional perspectives from our staff, but I think a lot of the stuff that we set forth in the responsibilities, we also map through our schedule of when we review this material, when we do take certain steps, and so I think that's where we can also make sure that we're focused on those specific tasks and those specific things during that schedule. In some ways, more so than necessarily drilling down everything in the responsibilities, but I think it's important for us to get feedback on those responsibilities. So, certainly we can have those be sent in, supposed to share. Any other feedbacks on the responsibilities section there?
I do have another ad. Treasurer Wagner and some of her team were able to attend and I think graduate from the Edunomics also. So I had an opportunity through the cohort that I was in last year to go through some of our committee reports, our committee goals and work plans with Edunomics, specifically because I was on budget. And it does align with those state requirements of board committees. So I do want to, I'm glad that, I was going to say former President Lindy. I'm glad that Mr. Lindy that Ben brought that up because it does tie. We spent some time last year with the folks from Georgetown going through the budget just to kind of align on what the role of the board is and what some of our committee responsibilities are. And they didn't have any objections around. That's how I know O was about lobbyists, because that really is a state standard for the board to be financially bringing in some money. So I'm happy though, Ben, to look through this again with you and share any information that I have. If you find that something doesn't align with Edunomics, which for the public's edification, the Edunomics was a school funding certificate program that I went through with some of the people in the treasurer's office and learned a lot about, and Ben had an opportunity to go through that the year previously, but it talks about funding, and then they have an opportunity for you to look at your state because it's a national cohort, and we looked at the state of Ohio and aligned it with the work plan. But if you see something that doesn't fit, I'm happy to, but I did have them look at it and it all seemed to align. But do you all see any misalignment having gone through that?
And I think what we certainly can do is have feedback on things that we need to in some cases maybe rewording things that we have not done as a practice, right? So even to the example of Treasurer Wagner's example with the lobbyist, it may need to be worded to direct specific things that we would be reviewing as a committee that's related to the budget, as opposed to just general, we have lobbyists come every other week or something to that effect, right?
Sure.
So that's types of stuff we can also do to make sure that the wording matches up to actually what we are doing in practice.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So I have a suggestion. or a request, I guess. I'd like to take those responsibilities back to my team and have us go through it line by line, because I noticed the first line on there, it talks about reviewing the tax budget, which the finance committee never does because it hasn't formed yet when we have to present it at the first board meeting in January. So would it be okay if we reviewed it and came back with edits in February?
That's an excellent suggestion, and I think we can. I think if you all want to take the lead as far as going through and reviewing those responsibilities, I think the board member or the committee members can also take a look at it, and we meet in February. If you want to bring forth your your suggestions, and then we can provide any feedback towards that. I did want to also go through the calendar.
Yes.
Just to make sure that, we had some things on there that were based on what we were doing at the time last year that we'll have to kind of work through. And so that's one also that, Treasurer Wagner, if you're okay with, maybe taking lead on looking at what we need to have as we go forward. And then you and I can maybe schedule a time to walk through the calendar so we can have that as something also we present in February.
Sure. So I had a couple questions, because there's some things that came up last year that we thought should be added to the work plan, but it was never formalized.
Yes.
Like, for example, the report out of the benefits audit progress. They're supposed to come monthly, and I don't know if the new finance committee wants that to be monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly. What's your desire?
So, does anyone have thoughts on it?
I feel like a little kid that just got caught not paying attention.
So, just to recap, the benefits audit, we came back in audits several years later and recognized that there were still things that had not been met that needed to be addressed. And so one of the suggestions at last year's Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee was that we would have benefits come in and update us on a schedule as to the things that they were doing to fix still remaining issues. And so the question from Treasurer Wagner, and it actually definitely directs straight to our budget, because some of these issues were things that cost us lots of money.
Yeah.
Do we want that to be something that continues? And also welcome Superintendent. So are there thoughts from the board members as to whether or not we want to have that be something that they provide some regularity to?
Thanks, Brennan. So we've decided we're on first name basis for board members in finance this year. This would fall to me in that category of, is this helpful to you all? If it is helpful for the administration to have those kinds of sessions around benefits with this committee and feedback from us, from my perspective, that sounds great. I don't think it's independently important for me to add it outside of the priorities that I shared earlier. But if it's important to my colleagues, I'm certainly happy to do what the majority wants.
So I was paying attention this time. I think I'd like for it to align with the audit committee's needs as well, because I know that the audit committee has been, at the end of the year, had also been looking at some of the benefits recommendations, and if the benefits were actually done, and if they were done, were they effective in reviewing that. So if the benefits is being presented to the audit committee monthly, or whatever that cadence is, I think it's also prudent that we as a budget committee look at them in the same cadence as well. But I'm also I'm very interested in, right now, while we are formulating this budget, I think we do have a fiscal responsibility to see things with more, a little bit more timely. I also recognize that after June 30th, we may not need it as much. So I'm fine with a cadence that's aggressive now, with the intention that we may have to ease off on that, or that we could ease off on that later, or adjust it as necessary. But I do really want to align with what the audit committee has said that they wanted, and they were particularly interested in the benefits, results, information, and the efficiency of that. And then HR, just not just benefits, but HR. We've gotten quite a bit of eyes on that, and I think the internal auditor needs to have more attention there. But I think that we should be connected to with some sort of during this budget season with some sort of regular timely cadence. That's my vote.
So I do have one, and I think actually is something that we could have them certainly come back, because it has been a point of focus both for audit committee, but in general, it's been had an effect on our budget over the years. But I wanted to make sure that we would be getting effective information in whatever schedule that we would have them coming forward. Because I think the other thing that I'm concerned about is if we did like monthly and they basically tell us the same report each month, it's not an effective use of our time, or is it effective use of their time? But I think maybe quarterly might be some benefits. I don't know. There's Wagner or Superintendent, right?
Or Lauren.
Sure, I'd be happy to provide a little context, and I'm sure Superintendent Wright can build upon. So I think historically, from an audit committee perspective, if I could summarize their thoughts, is that I think they got so many regular updates for so many years that when this new audit, the second round of follow-up was issued, they said, what's a new way of ensuring accountability and keeping folks up to date without perhaps, like you said, reports that don't necessarily have a lot of differences between them. And so I think as we approach this year, it's striking a balance between those updates, and I think the real value it adds, as well as the accountability side of things. I think when people know they have to go and present, and they're making a public statement that I will have completed X by this date, and they know they have to come and share that, I think that is, even for myself, I think that keeps me on schedule as well. So I think there's an opportunity perhaps to strike that balance of accountability, but not reiterating things that people already may be aware of.
What's your suggestion, Lauren?
So I would perhaps, in talking with the benefits team, I think it would be beneficial, and I think they have, but to really hone in on some key deadlines and dates and timelines. And so perhaps as those dates approach, coming and reporting by November, we've planned to accomplish X. November comes, and in fact we did, or perhaps we hit this roadblock for these reasons. I think that, in my mind, is a really logical way to approach things, because I think it sets expectations on the front end and then has accountability on the back end.
Superintendent, right?
Thank you, Lauren. And just to go back a little bit, this is something that we've been kind of working through for a period of time in the follow-up. So I would concur with Lauren that some cadence I think is good. I don't know if it's necessary. Some of the meetings that I've been in, or as I'm looking at the review of what's going to be presented, there's just not updated information. I do believe that started though, because from the audit from, I want to say 2021 to the time, or it was actually 1920, or when we came, there were updates that were being provided to the audit committee, and then we found out actually that the work had not actually been done. So I think that was the reason for the ask. So we're monitoring it a different way. I'm open to bi-monthly or quarterly, in terms of updates, or even looking at when those milestone dates are as well. I think either one of those will work.
I think it might be helpful, and again, I think it is a good idea to keep it on the agenda. I think what we may need to do is just figure out what's the best cadence that aligns with the work that's being done. Because to both both Lauren, your statement, and also Superintendent Wright, there may be months where no change will happen substantially to what they would report to us. That may not be effective time for them to come to us. But if there are different milestones along the year that they're supposed to be reaching or supposed to be hitting towards certain things, and we were, again, looking at different tools that we can use to help them be more effective and more efficient, that might be something we can attach a calendar schedule to. Yes.
And if helpful, I think Lauren and I can work together through this part, or even she worked with our chief of HR around this part as well, and giving what those milestone dates are, so that we can share them. And if it works for the agenda, then those would be the times that we would be able to come and figure it out. So
I think maybe for February, what we consider as a goal is, one, to add it into the responsibilities or list on there somehow, some way. And I don't know what the correct way to do that is, so I think we have to think about that language also. Because I think potentially this could be something Budget and Budget Finance and Growth does with anything that would be an audit concern that affects our budget, right? That if there's these things that we are noticing or observing that have come at a great cost. This could be a good space for us to have that conversation and how it affects the budget. So I want to make sure that language is clear, but then also to set the schedule for specifically the benefits audit is something if you two are able to work together. We can bring that back in February for our data. I say February 16th. February 16th from 10 to noon. So great. Are there other things as far as responsibilities before we move into just the calendar? Quick discussion.
I think the benefits audit report is already covered under the responsibilities where it talks about the reports of the audits. We might
Okay.
just tweak the language a little bit. So there was just the three, there was the CPP financial report out. That was kind of hit or miss last year. And then we've been working with, and I think Sally Grimes is on today online. We've been working with them on a quarterly financial report back to us, so they can show how they're spending money on our behalf. And so we'd like to get that into the work plan as well. And you know, I don't, you know, we've had other presentations like the city nurses that came a couple months ago. So those are the kinds of things I'm trying to capture, is if we can think through what do we want to hear and how often, and then that's not already on the work plan.
And I think, you know, again, to Ben's point earlier, we want to make sure that also these things are those things that are most directly related to both the budget, but also to the work of this committee towards the goals of the district, towards the vision of the district. We want to be able to be good stewards of folks' resources and time, but also make sure that we're demonstrating some financial responsibility to the work that we're doing as a district. And so I think Jen, you and I can kind of sit down and look through a number of these things within the monthly calendar. I will point a little bit towards, and I think this is one that has been on our calendar before. I think it'll probably stay somewhat on our calendar, but there are things like the preschool promise and other stuff that we are working through that, at least because we committed to it prior to coming to this meeting, I would like for us to be able to at least have the discussion to resolve it as where we are standing at the end of its kind of process. It doesn't necessarily need to be the full-on reports as we probably had in the past, but those are things that I think we can sit down and talk through when we look at the calendar. The other thing with the calendar is I know we had that list of financial transactions requiring board approval at the end of it. And so I think that's something that also can be just updated to make sure that we have the right dates.
Yes, I think Kevin's working on that.
Perfect. Because I think that'll also guide what we do when. Because I know there are a number of things that we have to approve on that schedule. Are there other thoughts with regard to the work plan? I know, again, we're going to bring this back next month to kind of work through it. Yes. No.
Her some recommendations to share for these internal auditor reports to think through the timing. I think these were just kind of spread out in 6-month increments. But I know when it comes, you know, Ms. Davis reaches out and says, what's the update? And I say, nothing this month. So perhaps we could think through, do we want to talk about the risk assessment during our risk planning period? Do we want to bring a draft of the plan to finance? So I'd be happy to share some ideas, or perhaps we could meet and discuss as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think these are some of the things that, again, we can work through as we come to the next month's meeting and bring those back to the full committee. And these are the things that I think are great ways for us to become effective in our use of our time. So I think that also connects up to our need for the audit committee and their presence at our meetings to be more effective, right? Because if we're discussing things that then they are able to be aware of and be apparent to in their meetings about the work that's being done, it's really helpful. Other thoughts? Alrighty, so we will commit to several meetings over the next month for the work plan. No, I mean, like me and other folks. All right, wonderful people. Yes, Ben.
One more on other business.
Yeah. Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. Okay. So that was just the work plan. So we're down to our last one here. Other business. I didn't have anything specifically prepared for any other business, but I want to open it up to anyone who has other business items. Ben?
Thank you. This is a minor relative to all of the budget stuff, but I'm right that with the crossing guards at schools, we pay for those, but the city hires them, but they do get paid from us. I would like to advocate strongly that we take that back in house, and not a decision to be made today, and not any kind of directive from us. I just, from one board member's perspective, I wanted to share a frustrating experience, which is that at my daughter's school at Hyde Park, they've gone all year without a crossing guard. And I've reached out to city council folks about this, and they put us in touch with the relevant person, took a couple of emails, we got the right person, and there just is an unbelievable absence of urgency around having a strategy to, like, the answer is always, we just had no applicants, we've had no applicants, but there doesn't appear to be any kind of proactive recruitment strategy to find people, and I think I'm trying to say two things at once. Like, on the one hand, there are much bigger issues that we need to figure out. I acknowledge that, and I wanted to at least register. It's a real pain point for parents, and it just feels like the incentives aren't aligned, because it's so much closer to kind of our world than the city's world with all the things they've got going on. And if we're paying for it anyway, I have a little bit more confidence in our ability to go find people. So I just wanted to share that, and if people have reactions, great, and if not, I wanted to make sure I shared that feedback.
Pass it to the superintendent, but I just want to say, I felt like, Board Member Bolton's no longer on or President Bolton's no longer on the committee, but man, like, that was...
She's here in spirit.
Speaking her language there, man.
I find that people often compare me to Eve for all of the things that she and I have in common. So I get that a lot.
But I'll let superintendent. Right.
It's my eyes.
So I think that there are a few things, and thank you for sharing. I think that there are a few things for us to consider. This was in President and Chair Craig, congratulations, might have more information on this as well. This came up as one of the topics, or came up as a part of the conversation at the joint meeting last week with the city. And one of the things, so I think the city would love nothing more than for us to take that role back. I think for us, we would need to talk a little bit about processes, staffing, because that is a big part of that also. But Chair Craig brought up a very valid point in that, the crossing guards in most areas belongs to the city, because they're dealing with thoroughfares and areas that we do not have responsibility for. And number two, they're also dealing with students that aren't just CPS students. So whether that's, whether that is, so I think we would really want to get some more information around jurisdiction. I've not worked in a district before where the city did not own the crossing guards for those very reasons. But I've also not worked in a city where the city also didn't pay for those crossing guards. So that's something that's unique as well. So I think that it has come up several times. And there was discussion the other night. I think that we'll work with staff to see what additional information that we can get around the overall implications. Yeah. Because I do think that, when I met earlier, and I shared this with the board, but when I met earlier with the city manager around those initial asks, as it was being shared with us that the city had money and they were willing to give us money. I met with the city manager, who shared with me that they didn't have money. And that, it was not going to be something they would be able to do. But in that conversation, one of their requests, or one of their conversations, was, we would love to give this to
CPS.
Yeah.
So let us do some more research and then we can come back and report out to the board because I do know that it's come up a few different times now.
And I think if it's okay, I think that's, all that's incredibly helpful. I apologize. I was not at that meeting. I'm glad you all talked about it. And I don't want to push too hard on the solution, but I do want to push hard on the problem. Because like it may be that us taking it in-house is not the right way to do it. I just want to say, at least in one school, the current situation is not working. And there may be other really much better ways of solving that problem, to which I'm completely open. And I appreciate everything.
Thank you.
So may I ask you to do a cost benefit, a long-term cost benefit analysis on that?
That's what I was gonna kind of mention that. I think that we've had this discussion before as a board. Last year we had this discussion, I think I want to say at our work group, we were all together, but it comes down to cost, and we've never gotten a complete cost analysis of when you bring people in-house, how much does that cost with regard to benefits, with regard to all of that. I personally am like in sitting on the budget, like how can we afford that? And I want to know what the costs look like. And then is that an opportunity for partnerships with other schools, private and charter, who also share that? That was some of the feedback we got from the meeting last week with the city is because there is a large complement of non-public, non-CPS schools, this would be a great opportunity to form a partnership around, hey, how much can you pay and how much can we pay? And maybe it's a conglomeracy that is formed instead of it just being the district paying for that like we do for transportation. So I think the city is probably really poised for this conversation. Per what Superintendent Wright shared, they shared with us last year, like, hey, yeah, take it. But what does that really look like? And I don't know if we've done our due diligence on our end to assume that responsibility. So maybe and I think it is in our ad hoc report, but also can we maybe form some partnerships around that too? What does that really look like?
I think this is, again, this is a great topic for us to identify these types of things that within our budget that we have to consider and factor in. I think to Dr. Cream's point that there is a cost to bringing folks in, but to Ben's point also, we have seen that they have not fulfilled their obligation to provide the necessary folks. And I know one of the things that did come up also during the session was that they provide training through the Cincinnati Police Department for crossing guards. Again, I think there's some ways that we may be able to bring some folks in or reassign some tasks within our current staff. And those are different ways to think about what we do around our buildings versus what is done beyond our buildings. And so in some ways, part of the problem, to your point, Ben, is that the problem is around our buildings. We don't have the same type of staffing on crossing guards in some ways that maybe some other areas do. And so that's just something for us to think about and kind of give the superintendent and the treasurer a little time to work through some of that conversations with what that would look like financially, but also realistically, do we keep the same number of people if we bring them in-house, right? Do folks say, oh no, I work for the city, like this is an easy way for me to stay here, I don't want to have to go through another process, or these type of things that all be factors that be part of the discussion. But it was something that was brought up and it was something that I think the city council members also took to heart, as to we have to be creative in how we provide those services, as well as thinking about the safety around schools to make it easier for folks. I know the several city council members were suggesting things like, how do we put in ways to control traffic that do not involve people? That might be other ways around schools that would provide some level of safety. I think, again, we're an urban school district, that realistically some of our schools are on major roads that just present its own problems. So I think that's a great point for us to be thinking about. Yes.
Mr. Craig, I know that there was discussion of forming like a little partnership. Councilmember Johnson, I want to say you and Board Member or Vice President Weinberg, we're going to talk about
I got to work together on that because the zones around the school and also watching resources the city to coordinate some of that conversation.
So, board member, in that effort, they were forming like a little, a team, city CPS, to see around the, but I don't remember specifically, but it was in the meeting it came out.
It sounds like it is.
If you'd like to give input, you're welcome.
I appreciate the input. And if you need help, I'm in. But it does sound like that's a great group of people.
Are there other business topics?
Yes, a request from the audit committee. So I have put together, if you don't mind passing those just down and around, there are 4 documents, and they are just points of housekeeping, if you will, but exciting ones. The first is a proposed list of 2024 calendar year meeting dates for the audit committee. And then the subsequent documents are drafts of resolutions of 2 new audit committee members, which 2 of our finance members were privy to the conversation at our December 13th audit committee meeting, but Mr. Lindy, this may be new and we're happy to expand upon. And then the second resolution is the reappointment of 2 of our highly valued members. And finally, our third is the reappointment, but via an election process, of our chair and vice chair for just a single calendar year. So happy to answer any questions or expand upon, but my kind request is for a review and approval, so these resolutions can move forth for full board approval at, I believe, the February 5th board meeting.
Thumbs up over here. Thumbs up. All right. I think you have the committee's approval.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And then again, we'll share out the, Lauren, if you can share out the dates via email so that folks can, I know Dr. Kareem and I have already been receiving those, but since we have our new returning member to the Budget and Finance Committee, to share those all with Ben also.
Absolutely. And one additional point is Ms. Bolton served on a planning session that we did. It's just an hour before every audit committee meeting. So Mr. Craig, if you wouldn't mind being a part of those conversations so we can ensure an alignment between finance and audit committee as we plan the agendas.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All of that will be coming your way. Thank you.
All the fun. Any other business? The only thing that I would add on also is I know we had a few things at the end of last year. I know we had a couple of policies that we hit at the end of last year. I just would say if there's anything that we haven't completed or haven't as a committee approved that was left over, then maybe, again, Treasurer Wagner, if you and I can talk about that for next month, just to make sure we get it on the agenda if we need to.
Yes, there was some topics that were rolling over to like, for example, the redesign of the treasurer's report and the crowdfunding policy. So we'll get that. I'll work with you to get it back on the agenda. What I don't know is, I know there was a question about the COPS on land, and I don't know. I saw an email, but I don't know if the email went back to Finance Committee or the board. So was that resolved, or do we need to bring that back?
I believe that was shared with the entire board, but if it hasn't been, we certainly can make sure it gets shared. And I know there's a lot of hard work that's put into also the monthly financials, so I want to make sure that we also have that onto, whatever we want to do as far as that format going forward, to have that on next month's agenda as well.
Right.
Anything else? Not to belabor this any further. If there's nothing else, are there any? No. Okay. No hearing.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Sure. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting?
I so move.
All righty.